My name is Isabella Rowan. I'm 67 years old and I spent most of my life working with wood. I carved cribs and cabinets, the kind people kept for generations, not for fashion but for meaning. I used to believe that if you shaped something with care, it would last, that it would hold. But some things, some people, don't. It was a Thursday night, the kind that smells like old rain and leftover coffee. I had just set my book down when my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Daniel, my son. He rarely left voicemails, so I assumed it was an accident. I pressed play. "I can't deal with Mom anymore," he said. My breath caught. "She's slowing us down. Sabrina's uncle found a facility. Just keep her calm till Friday. The file is almost ready. We move her quietly." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. He must have meant to send it to Sabrina, but it came to me. My own son, talking about me like I was a thing, a burden, a task to be handled. And that phrase, "move her quietly," like I was furniture, or worse, a problem to disappear. I sat in the dark for a long time, the glow of the screen fading while his words echoed in the room. I replayed it 3 times. The last time, I listened not for shock, but for confirmation. My son had a plan, and I wasn't supposed to know, but now I did. They didn't know I'd heard it. They didn't know I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the hallway where light spilled from the kitchen, wondering how long they'd been preparing this. They didn't know I'd already begun to stand up from the place they had tried to bury me in, because that voicemail changed everything. And the next morning, I walked out, without a sound, without a warning, armed with a plan they would never see coming. If you've ever been dismissed, overlooked, or made to feel invisible in your own home, stay with me. Because what happened next didn't just change the locks on the door, it changed me. The night after that voicemail, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even speak. I sat with a stillness that came not from fear, but from clarity. My house was no longer mine, at least not in their eyes. That message wasn't just careless, it was calculated. I walked into the kitchen. The light was on. Sabrina had left her tea steeping, the scent of chamomile hanging like something fake and polite. I opened the cupboard. One of my mugs was missing, not just any mug, the red one. The one Daniel painted in kindergarten, clumsy brushstrokes spelling Mom across the side. I stared into the space it used to sit. I had thought love protected you from things like this. That history mattered. That being a mother gave you some unspoken shield. But love, I was learning, could be repurposed. It could be used to dull your senses while someone quietly rearranged your life. Daniel was 38 now. Grown, married. With his wife, Sabrina, he'd started calling my home our place. At first, I thought it was endearing. Then I noticed the mail changing, utilities redirected, furniture decisions made without me. The hallway mirror vanished one day. The books I loved had been boxed and sent to donation without a word, little things. But that voicemail made them large. It gave everything context. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was removal. They weren't just tidying, they were replacing me. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The night was quiet, the air soft against my face. From the garden gate, I could see the edge of the driveway where they sometimes stood and whispered. That gate used to be where Daniel waited for the school bus. Now it was where my future was being discussed in hushes and timelines. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I packed a small leather folder with things I hadn't looked at in years. Documents, a copy of the deed, my identification, and a letter Marcus had written before he passed. He always told me, "Don't wait until they tell you who you are. Show them quietly." By morning, my mind had cleared like frost melting from glass. I dressed in my gray church suit, the one I wore when I needed to feel like myself, the one Marcus loved. I left a note on the table. Running errands. Don't wait up. Then I walked out the door. They had no idea what that voicemail had awakened. They thought they were moving me quietly, but I had already begun to move on my own. I didn't go far that morning, just to a diner a few blocks down, the kind with chipped mugs and a waitress who knew how to leave you alone. I sat in the corner booth, stirred cream into my coffee, and stared through the window like the glass would somehow show me who I used to be. Marcus used to say the hardest part of carving wood was knowing when to stop. One wrong cut and you ruin everything. Maybe that's what happened to Daniel. Maybe I held on too long. Or maybe I didn't hold on tight enough. I touched the pocket of my coat where I'd tucked his father's old chisel. It wasn't sharp anymore. I kept it not for its use, but for what it represented. The handle was worn, the metal dulled from years of labor. It had built our first crib, our kitchen table. The sign above my tiny workshop, Rowan Carvings, built to last. That workshop had been my second home. After Marcus died, heart failure, sudden and cruel, I poured everything into that shop. I raised Daniel on splinters and sawdust, on lessons about patience and care. I taught him how to sand along the grain, not against it, how to make something useful from what others discarded. And now, here I was. Discarded. I thought about the voicemail again, not just the words, the tone, the way he said mom like it was a problem, not a person, the way he called my existence something that slows them down. I wondered if Marcus would have heard it the same way, or if I was just old, sensitive, sentimental. But no, it was there. Cold, measured, planned. The coffee tasted bitter, but I drank it anyway. I remembered the day Daniel brought Sabrina home for the first time. She wore perfume that smelled like lilies and entitlement. She smiled without warmth, touched things that weren't hers, asked me if I ever thought about retiring from all this wood stuff. I laughed back then. I thought she was just nervous. But that laugh lodged itself like a splinter, and it never left. I paid the bill in cash and left a tip too large for a meal too small, the kind of gesture that says, I still can. Walking back, the street felt unfamiliar. Same trees, same sidewalk cracks. But something had shifted. The house was still there, gray and square like it had always been, but I no longer saw it as mine. When I stepped inside, I heard the clink of dishes from the kitchen. Sabrina's voice floated through the hallway, cheerful and high-pitched, saying something about brunch plans. She didn't even glance up as I passed. Daniel was on the couch, typing into his phone. He looked up, half-smiled, and said, Hey, Mom, you were out early. I nodded. Just nodded. Then went straight to my room. On my dresser sat the framed photo of Marcus in his workshop. He had dust on his glasses, a pencil behind his ear, and that look of quiet focus. I picked it up and sat on the edge of my bed. You'd hate this, I whispered. You'd hate what's happening. Under the bed, I kept a box of old documents, tax returns, insurance forms, deeds. I hadn't opened it in years. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the files. Everything was there, everything with my name on it, my signature, my ownership. The house was mine. It had been purchased with the life insurance Marcus left behind, every inch of it built on sweat and savings. And now, Sabrina was using her charm and Daniel's silence to pry it from under me. I found an envelope at the bottom of the box, Marcus's handwriting on the front. In case they forget who you are. I didn't open it. Not yet. Just knowing it was there made my spine straighten. I placed the chisel next to it on the table. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. They thought I was too quiet, that I wouldn't notice, that I'd fade into the wallpaper like some old curtain. But what they didn't understand was this. I'd spent a lifetime shaping things that lasted. I knew how to rebuild, I knew how to hold steady, and I knew how to begin, quietly. There's a kind of kindness that doesn't feel like love. It feels like removal, like someone placing a hand on your shoulder, not to comfort you, but to guide you out of the way. It began slowly, the sort of slow that doesn't make noise until you realize what's gone. Daniel offered to help with the bills one day, just to make things easier, he said. I thought it was sweet, until I noticed the utility accounts no longer came in my name. Next, the thermostat settings changed. I'd wake up, shivering, only to find it locked behind a password I didn't set. I asked Daniel about it once, and he said, "It's just more efficient this way, Mom. We're trying to streamline." Streamline. Then the furniture started moving. My armchair, soft and low, perfect for evenings with a book, vanished. In its place was a sleek, hard-edged thing Sabrina said she found on sale. "It's modern," she smiled, "more aligned with the space." The only space I wanted was the one where I could breathe. I tried to keep working from my corner of the garage, my carving bench, my tools, the smell of cedar and linseed oil, but Daniel came down one afternoon and said, "Maybe it's time to slow down, Mom. You're getting tired more easily. Sabrina and I can handle things now." I didn't respond, just picked up the piece I was shaping, a small box with dovetailed joints, and ran my fingers along the edges. I could still feel the wood, still understand it. My hands weren't tired. My heart was. Later that week, I went to pour myself a glass of water and noticed the kitchen glasses had changed. The hand-blown set Marcus and I bought in Oregon was gone, replaced by clear, stemless tumblers from some brand Sabrina liked. I opened the cabinets one by one. My teapot was missing, my favorite plates. Even the sugar canister I'd painted decades ago was gone. I asked Daniel about it gently. "Sabrina just thought we could freshen things up a bit," he said. "Nothing personal, just aesthetic." Everything that once carried my fingerprint was vanishing. The final nudge came one evening when Daniel stopped me in the hallway and said, "We've been thinking. It might be a good time for you to take a break. Maybe step back from house matters for a while. Let us handle the paperwork, the finances, all of it." I looked at him, standing there with that hesitant smile he used when he was about to say something he knew I wouldn't like. His eyes didn't meet mine. "You mean," I said carefully, "you want to manage everything without me?" "No, not like that," he said quickly. "Just simplify. You deserve to rest, Mom." Rest. A word that felt more like a curtain drawing shut than a blanket being offered. That night, I went into the study, what used to be Marcus's den, and pulled open the drawer where I kept important papers. Something caught my eye. A file folder thicker than the rest. Inside were documents I hadn't seen before, Medicare forms, Social Security requests, an intake application for an assisted living facility. My name was on them. And at the bottom, my signature. Only I hadn't signed them. I held the page up to the lamp. The signature looked like mine, but there was something slightly off, too smooth, like it had been traced. And then it hit me. Sabrina had mentioned working with a notary a few weeks back. She'd laughed over dinner about how easy it was to schedule things online now. I thought she was talking about refinancing her car loan, but now I saw it differently. They weren't just easing my load. They were lifting me out of the picture, quietly, efficiently. I sat in the desk chair for a long time, the fake signature trembling in my hands. They were preparing the world to believe I was no longer capable, that I was slipping, that I didn't notice things, but I noticed everything. And I had been carving long enough to know when someone was trying to hollow you out from the inside. Dinner used to be a ceremony in our home. Nothing grand, just plates, soft light, and conversation that drifted like smoke from a chimney. I'd make roasted vegetables, maybe a stew if the day was cold, and we'd sit together, the three of us. 3 plates, 3 forks, 3 stories unfolding. But lately, dinner had started without me. That night, I came down a few minutes late. The smell of baked salmon and lemon filled the air, but the table was already occupied. 3 chairs pushed in, only 2 of them filled. No plate for me, no fork, no napkin, just space, quiet and plain. I stood in the doorway for a moment before Sabrina looked up. "Oh," she said, blinking like I'd surprised her. "I thought you were going to eat later." Her tone was light, breezy, like forgetting your mother-in-law at the dinner table was an understandable oversight. Daniel didn't speak. He glanced down at his plate, fork already halfway to his mouth. "It's fine," I said softly, stepping back. I went into the kitchen and made a sandwich, plain toast, turkey, no mustard. I sat at the counter, back to them, listening to their laughter, their plans for the weekend. I wasn't in those plans, not even in the space they occupied together. Later, after they'd gone upstairs, I returned to the dining room. My chair was still pushed in, untouched. I reached out and brushed my fingers along the table's edge. The wood was smooth, but beneath the surface I could feel the hairline splits forming. In the hallway, a printer hummed faintly from the office. Odd for this hour. Curious, I stepped inside. The light from the screen glowed pale blue across the walls. A document had just been printed. Still warm, the paper bore my name at the top. I recognized the layout, forms from the Social Security Administration. My information filled in neatly, but one line made me stop. Representative Payee Request, Form SSA 11, the request to manage my benefits. My eyes moved to the signature line, my name, signed again in that smooth, too perfect way. Beside it, a note, POA on file. See attached. Power of attorney. But I hadn't given it. My heart thudded, not fast, but heavy, like each beat was pushing something deeper into my ribs. I opened the desk drawer and found the folder. Inside were copies of a power of attorney document notarized, dated 2 months ago. There was a signature that looked like mine. But I had never sat before a notary. I had never handed over my name. I stood in that office, holding the pages, realizing what had happened. Sabrina had taken my handwriting, old grocery lists, maybe a holiday card, and turned it into permission. Daniel had stayed silent, letting her do it. Or worse, helping. This wasn't just removal anymore. It was a transfer. On paper, I was no longer the owner of my decisions. And soon, if left unchallenged, I wouldn't be the owner of my home. I sat in Marcus's old office chair, the documents in my lap. On the wall was the wooden carving he'd made when Daniel was born. A simple plaque. "Welcome, Daniel," carved with love. I traced the letters with my fingers. I wondered how we got from there to here, from carving joy to forging signatures. But I knew one thing with certainty. They wanted me quiet, passive, moved into the background like old wallpaper. Instead, I was beginning to gather myself, and this time I would not wait to be erased. It was early afternoon when he came. I had just returned from the backyard, my hands smelling faintly of rosemary and wet soil. I heard the doorbell, then a soft knock, then a pause. Through the window, I saw a man standing at the garden gate, mid-40s, beige windbreaker, clipboard in hand. His hair was neatly parted, his shoes too clean for the gravel path. He waved gently when he saw me. "Ms. Rowan," he called. "I'm from the County Social Services Office, just here for a pre-admission check." I froze. The words didn't register at first. He smiled like it was routine, like I was expecting him. "I'm sorry," I said, stepping out onto the porch. "I don't recall any appointment." "These checks are often scheduled by family members," he replied, still calm, "especially when there's a guardianship file open." My throat tightened. "May I come in?" he asked. "It'll only take a few minutes." I didn't move. Instead, I looked down at the badge clipped to his chest. There was no photo, just a name typed in uneven font. The plastic was scratched and the laminate peeling at one corner. "Which office are you with again?" I asked. "County Services," he said quickly, too quickly. "We handle pre-admission evaluations for assisted care transitions." Transitions. I told him I needed a moment, then stepped back inside and shut the door. I didn't bolt it, just pressed my palm against the wood, steadying my breath. I walked to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and called the local office for Adult Protective Services. The line rang twice before a woman answered. I explained that someone had shown up claiming to be from their department. She asked for the name. I read it from his badge. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said. "We have no one by that name and no visits scheduled at your address." My chest hollowed. By the time I returned to the porch, the man was gone. The gate was slightly ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. I stood there for a long time, staring at the street. Nothing moved, no cars, no footsteps, just the echo of possibility that someone had come to see if I could be taken, quietly, without resistance. That evening, I didn't speak to Daniel or Sabrina. I moved through the house like a shadow, touching walls, light switches, the chipped edge of the banister. I was cataloging. Not possessions, but signs of change, subtle removals, silent replacements. After they went to bed, I returned to the office. I laid out the documents again, the forged power of attorney, the Medicare forms, the signature pages. My hands didn't shake anymore. I opened my old black notebook and started writing. Every date, every name, every detail I could recall. I didn't know yet what I would do with it, but I knew I would need it. Before turning off the light, I reached for the red leather envelope where I kept my most personal things. Tucked inside was a photograph of Marcus on our porch, arms crossed, sawdust in his beard. He looked tired but proud. Beneath the photo was a letter he had written me on our 30th anniversary. I didn't read it, just held it. It felt heavier now, like it was waiting. The next morning, Sabrina was cheerful at breakfast. She asked if I'd like her to pick up groceries. Her tone was syrupy, almost maternal, as if she'd already replaced me in the role of decision-maker. I smiled politely and said nothing. Let her think the quiet meant nothing. But silence, when chosen, is never empty. It's where plans begin. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue that morning, the kind that offered no promises. I left the house without a word, my leather notebook tucked beneath my coat. I didn't know exactly where I was going, only that I needed to speak with someone who remembered me before all of this, before I became a shadow in my own home. I took the bus. I hadn't ridden in years. The seats were cracked vinyl, the air faintly metallic, and the route slow enough to notice everything we passed. I got off near the old neighborhood where we used to live before Marcus died. The houses looked smaller now, less magic, more dust. But one of them still had wind chimes made from spoons and keys. That was where the Sinclairs lived. I knocked twice on the unit at the end. The door opened after a moment, and there she was, Olivia Sinclair. 27 now, though she still carried the same sharpness in her eyes I remembered from when she was just a girl helping her grandmother stain wood on the porch. "Ms. I?" she said, blinking in disbelief. "Is that really you?" I smiled. "I wasn't sure if you'd still recognize me." "Of course I do," she said, stepping aside quickly. "Come in, please." Her apartment was small but filled with light. Books stacked in corners, a kettle whistling softly in the background. There was a carved wooden lamp on the table, one of mine, from years ago. "You kept it," I said. "Of course I did," she replied, gently touching. "Its base. You taught me how to make dovetail joints. I was 12 and thought I'd invented something." We laughed. For the first time in what felt like weeks, my laughter didn't feel borrowed. I sat at her kitchen table while she poured us tea. "I saw your name on the firm's website," I said. "Legal assistant at Hayden and Bloom." She nodded. "Just started full-time last year. It's mostly contracts and probate, but I'm learning." I reached into my coat and placed my notebook on the table. "I need to check something quietly," I said. She didn't ask questions, just opened the notebook and began reading. Her brow furrowed as she turned the pages. Her lips parted slightly at the forged signatures, the printed Medicare forms, the note about the man at the garden gate. "This isn't just unethical," she said quietly. "It's dangerous. If this POA was filed officially, they could sell your house, change your care, even move you into a facility without your consent. I nodded. I know. She sat back, folding her arms. Have you spoken to anyone else about this? No, I wanted to start with someone I trusted. Her eyes softened. Thank you. I took a slow sip of tea, letting the warmth settle in my chest. You were always kind, Olivia, even when you were little. You used to bring your grandmother cookies when she forgot to eat. She taught me to look after the people who made me better, she said. She reached for her laptop and opened it. I can look up if a POA has been filed through the county recorder. If it has, we can check its status and whether it was notarized legally. Do you know the notary? I don't even remember signing anything. Then that's the first red flag, she said. If we find evidence of forgery, we can take it further. You'd have legal standing to challenge every change they've made. I didn't speak for a moment, just watched her hands move with calm precision. The same girl who once scraped her knees, helping me move lumber, now typing with purpose to help me find my footing again. She looked up. I can help you, Miss I. We don't have to make noise right away, but we can start gathering what matters. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The room felt sturdier somehow, like a floor had settled beneath my feet again. I don't want revenge, I said. I just want my life back. Olivia nodded. Then we'll make sure the truth is louder than whatever they've written on paper. Before I left, she handed me a folder. In here, she said, are the first steps, instructions for a certified affidavit, a form to request a hearing. Nothing binding yet, just preparation. I smiled. Preparation was always Marcus's favorite part. As I stepped outside, the wind picked up, cold but not cruel. And for the first time in days, I felt something other than fear. I felt remembered. I returned home just after 3. The house was quiet, the way it often was in the middle of the day. Sabrina had gone out, her shoes were missing from the mat by the door, and Daniel was likely in his study, headphones on, buried in spreadsheets, and silence. I moved through the rooms without a sound, each footstep measured. I felt like a visitor now. No, not even that. A guest implies welcome. I was an occupant of empty spaces, tolerated until relocated, but not today. I placed Olivia's folder on the kitchen table and made a cup of tea. The red mug was still gone. I used a plain white one and held it with both hands as I walked to my bedroom. The leather notebook sat where I left it. I opened it, added more notes. The name of the man at the gate, the fake ID, the printout of the forged POA, the absence of a notary seal. I was building something now, not out of wood, but out of truth. Later that evening, when the house had gone dim and the hallway lights hummed low, I slipped into the garage. My workbench had been cleared off, Sabrina's idea of decluttering, but a few of my older tools were still in the drawer. I took the chisel, the smooth-handled one Marcus had favored, and tucked it into my coat pocket. Not for use, just for grounding. The next morning, I told Daniel I was going to the bank. He looked up, surprised. Do you want me to come with you? No, I said gently. Just something small. I left before Sabrina could offer to drive. At the bank, I sat with a woman named Janine. She had silver-rimmed glasses and the sort of polite smile that made you want to tell the truth. I'd like to check my account activity, I said. All joint activity. Transfers, updates, everything. She asked for my ID, which I provided. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. A moment later, her brow furrowed. There was a change in authorized users, she said. A few weeks ago, a new name was added, Sabrina Rowan. I leaned forward slightly. Under what authority? She presented a power of attorney, Janine said, glancing at her screen. Said you were in transition to full-time care and wanted her to manage the household. My mouth was dry, but my voice didn't waver. I'd like to revoke all third-party access. Immediately. Janine blinked. Yes, of course. We'll need to verify some details and initiate a reversal protocol. I nodded. and I'll need copies of everything she signed." She printed them without protest. I thanked her, slid the pages into Olivia's folder, and walked 2 blocks to the law office. Olivia was waiting. We sat in the small conference room, the blinds half drawn. She flipped through the documents, her face unreadable. "This POA," she said, tapping the paper, "isn't notarized properly, and it contradicts state requirements for medical designation." "What does that mean?" "It means she has no legal standing to act on your behalf." We sat quietly for a moment. Then, Olivia pulled out her laptop. "We need evidence," she said. "Solid, documented, time-stamped." I nodded. "What kind?" "Recordings, photos, dated emails. If Sabrina forged anything, we need to show intent. We'll also need proof that you're of sound mind. A recent evaluation would help." I looked at her. "You mean they could still say I'm not capable?" "It's likely part of their strategy," she said. "Undermine your credibility, create confusion, and quietly shift control." I pressed my palms together. "Then we let them keep talking," I said. Olivia tilted her head. "They think I'm unaware, that I'm harmless. But tomorrow I'll give them the rope," I said, "and they'll tie it themselves." That evening, back home, I noticed Sabrina on the phone. Her voice was low, sharp at the edges. "No, she doesn't know anything. Just keep it ready by Friday. Once the order comes through, she'll be gone." She paused. "Yes, the papers are filed. Everything's moving." She turned the corner and stopped when she saw me. "Oh, hey," she said too brightly. "I was just confirming a spa appointment." I smiled. "Sounds relaxing." She nodded, watching me for a moment, then walked away. I stood there, the hallway light casting a long shadow behind me. They didn't know. Not yet. But I had begun. It was nearly midnight when I heard them. I hadn't been sleeping well. The house held too many silences that didn't feel empty, only heavy. I got up to make tea, again, and as I stepped into the hallway, I paused near the vent outside Daniel and Sabrina's bedroom. The floor creaked, so I stilled. That's when I heard Daniel's voice, muffled but clear enough. "I don't know, Sabrina. What if she finds out?" There was a pause. Her voice came through sharper, thinner. "She won't. The order's already in motion. She'll be in Cypress Pines by the weekend." My breath caught. Daniel sounded tired. "I just don't feel right about this. It's still her house." There was a soft scoff. "Not on paper. That's the whole point. We move her quietly, remember? Once the guardianship is approved, we don't even need to tell her about the sale." There was rustling. Maybe Daniel pacing. Maybe guilt finally settling in. "I can't believe we're doing this," he said. Sabrina snapped back. "Well, I can. Because unlike you, I didn't spend my whole life afraid of her little moral lectures. This is survival. You want to keep drowning in debt? Fine. But I'm not letting this house rot under a woman who talks to furniture and thinks a chisel is a sacred relic." I leaned against the wall, my fingers gripping the trim until my knuckles ached. A moment later, Daniel said, "Softer now. What if she hears us?" "She won't. She never walks around this late." I stepped back, careful not to make a sound. Their door remained closed, their world undisturbed. I returned to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. Cypress Pines. They'd chosen a place. They had already filed the paperwork. They were talking about selling my home. I pulled open the drawer of my nightstand and took out the small voice recorder Olivia had given me that afternoon. I had brought it home, unsure if I'd need it. Now I did. I replayed the segment I'd just recorded. It was faint but clear enough, especially Sabrina's voice, sharp, confident, cruel. That would be enough to raise questions in any courtroom, enough to raise doubt. I backed up the file to the USB Olivia gave me and placed it inside the folder marked Evidence. Then I dated it, time-stamped it, labeled the location. The woman they were trying to erase had just become their witness. The next morning, I didn't speak to either of them. I sat at the kitchen table while Sabrina made herself a smoothie and hummed tunelessly. Daniel barely looked up from his phone. They had no idea. I watched them move around the kitchen like actors rehearsing a life, each step choreographed, each smile artificial. I sipped my tea slowly and said nothing. Later, when they were both out, I returned to the office and opened the file drawer. Inside were additional documents I hadn't seen yet. Real estate listings, an unsigned agreement with a brokerage firm, even a draft sale agreement with a pending inspection date, Friday. They had planned everything. Daniel's name was listed as seller. Sabrina's name appeared as authorized co-agent. And next to the proposed sale price, $745,000, was a handwritten note. Payoff loan, always erase shared debt. They weren't just moving me out. They were using my home to save themselves. I scanned the documents, photographed them, saved each one to a new folder on Olivia's flash drive. Before I closed the drawer, I noticed a manila envelope tucked in the back. It was older, creased at the corners, and had my name written on it in block letters. Inside were bank statements dating back 2 years, and a letter, unsigned but clearly written by Daniel. A draft, maybe. It read, "Mom, this isn't personal. We just can't keep carrying you. It's too much. The house is better off in someone else's hands. You'll be cared for, and we'll be free." I sat there, reading the same lines over and over. You'll be cared for. Like a task, a transaction, not a woman who built the walls he now slept behind. I placed the letter back into the envelope and closed the drawer. Outside, the wind picked up, leaves skittering across the porch. The house groaned slightly like it knew. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I organized everything, the documents, the photos, the audio. I made copies, created timelines, numbered every page. They had turned my life into a file, so I did the same. And I wasn't done. Not yet. I woke before the sun. The house was still. That kind of stillness that felt staged, like silence set in place to cover something up. I slipped into my robe, walked to the kitchen, and reached for the cabinet on the left, second shelf, far corner. The red mug wasn't there. It always was. That was its place. I'd kept it for over 30 years. Daniel made it for me in second grade, molded lopsided from cheap ceramic and glazed in a color too bright to be natural. The handle had a slight crack, sealed with resin, but it held, like me. I opened the other cabinet. Nothing. Checked the dishwasher. Empty. I paused, staring at the space where it should have been. Then I noticed the trash bin hadn't been taken out yet. The bag inside was slightly overfilled, the corners of cardboard boxes peeking from beneath kitchen scraps. I pulled it open. Near the bottom, buried under a folded paper towel and the skin of a banana, I saw a sharp flash of red. I reached in carefully and lifted it out. The mug was broken, cracked in 3 neat pieces, each one placed beneath a layer of used tissues, as if someone had tried to bury it, not throw it away, not shatter it in rage, just discard it. Quietly. I didn't cry. I rinsed my hands, set the pieces on a paper towel, and stood at the sink. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and faint guilt. The red mug had survived 3 moves, 2 falls, 1 earthquake. But not this. They weren't just getting rid of clutter. They were erasing me, bit by bit, object by object, memory by memory. Daniel once gave me that mug with sticky hands and eyes full of pride. "It's for your tea," he'd said, "so you remember me even when I'm not home." Now the message was reversed. He was home, and he no longer wanted me there. I wrapped the broken pieces in the towel and placed them in my coat pocket. I didn't know why. Maybe it was proof. Maybe it was a wound I needed to keep close. Later that morning, Sabrina breezed into the kitchen. "Morning," she chirped, pouring herself almond milk into a glass. "Did you sleep okay?" I looked at her. She wore one of my old sweaters, the gray cable knit with elbow patches. I hadn't seen it in months. "It was chilly," I said. "Looks like you found something warm." She smiled, oblivious. "Oh, yeah, it was in a donation box in the garage. Hope you don't mind." I didn't respond, just stirred my tea with a spoon, waiting for her to leave the room. Once she did, I returned to the office. I opened the folder marked Intent. Inside were photographs I'd taken the week before of documents, notaries, mail with my name misspelled. A pattern. But now I added something new. A single sheet of paper with a photograph of the broken mug. Below it, I wrote, "Item removed. History erased. Memory discarded without consent." Olivia had told me that judges didn't just look for fraud. They looked for motive. This mug was motive. It was the kind of thing that spoke without shouting. That said, this is not care. This is removal. I slid the sheet into a plastic protector, sealed it, and added it to the binder. They thought I was slow, passive, sentimental, but they had never seen me organized. In the afternoon, Daniel came home early. He knocked gently on my door. "Mom?" I looked up. He opened it a crack. "Just wanted to check on you." I gave him a look he couldn't quite read. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Peachy," I said, though I seemed to be missing a few things. He hesitated. "Like what?" I stood, walked to the small bookcase. One shelf had always been mine. Old letters, photo albums, recipe cards. That morning it had been full. Now it was half empty. "Just little things," I said. "Nothing worth remembering." He gave a weak smile. "Sabrina's been tidying. You know how she gets." "Yes," I said. "I know exactly how she gets." That evening, I sat at my desk and opened the envelope Olivia had mailed over the night before. Inside were forms to begin the legal challenge. A cover letter in her handwriting read, "Your memories are valid. So is your name." I ran my fingers along the page. Outside, the sky was turning pink over the backyard. I lit a small candle and placed it beside the red mug's broken pieces. Not to mourn, to mark a line. I woke before dawn and didn't turn on the light. The room was wrapped in soft blue, the kind that comes just before the sun lifts the edge of the sky. I moved slowly, with purpose. There was no rush. I knew what I needed to do. I had rehearsed every step in my mind for days. On the dresser sat the gray suit I hadn't worn in years, the one I used to wear to church board meetings, community hearings, and the day Marcus and I paid off our first mortgage. Structured, simple, and steady. I slid into it like armor. My black leather shoes were already polished, placed neatly beneath the chair the night before. I tied my hair back in a low bun, applied a light touch of lipstick, and looked at myself in the mirror. Not to admire, to remember who I was, who I still was. I wrote a note and folded it once. I placed it on the kitchen table where the morning light would hit it first. It read, "Running errands. Don't wait up." Sabrina wouldn't notice anything strange. She never looked closely at what I left behind. I tucked the binder Olivia helped me prepare into my tote bag. Documents, photos, letters, and the recording from the hallway. I double-checked the USB was in its sleeve. Every page labeled, every date noted. I stepped outside at 5:30. The street was still asleep, the air crisp with the memory of night. I walked 3 blocks to the corner cafe that had just opened. I ordered a small black coffee, not because I needed caffeine, but because I wanted the receipt. Something time-stamped. I kept it. Proof. At 6:15, I arrived at the bank. Janine was already behind the glass, unlocking drawers and powering up screens. When she saw me, her expression changed. Kindness, mixed with respect. "I'd like to make a few changes," I said. She nodded. We moved to a private desk. I handed her my ID and began the process. "I'd like to revoke any and all access granted to Daniel or Sabrina Rowan. As of now, I am the sole account holder. Please confirm all password resets and issue a statement reflecting the changes." She clicked quickly. No questions. I watched the screen as she removed their names. Lines disappeared one by one, their fingerprints erased. We signed the paperwork. Then I opened the second folder. I'd also like to establish a new trust account under my name only, I said, and transfer the existing house deed into it. Janine raised her eyebrows slightly. Do you have the deed on hand? I do. I slid it across the desk. She examined it, then smiled. This is thorough. It needs to be. After the paperwork was filed, she gave me a small folder with stamped copies and her business card paper-clipped to the front. If anyone tries to access your records again, she said, have them call me directly. I will. By 7:30, I was in Olivia's office. She was already waiting, coffee in hand, hair still damp from the shower. I brought everything, I said. She opened the tote and glanced through it. You're meticulous, she said. This is stronger than most of what I see from trained clients. I gave a small laugh. I built cabinets for 30 years. This just has more paperwork. We sat at the long table, and Olivia began organizing the materials into separate packets. One for the county clerk, one for the fraud division, one for the civil petition. I signed 6 forms, 2 affidavits, 3 official statements of revocation, and 1 request for emergency review of guardianship fraud. When it was done, Olivia looked up. You've done everything right, she said. They won't see this coming. I'm counting on that. At 9:15, we walked into the municipal building together. The hall smelled of paper and disinfectant. The clerk behind the glass greeted us with a nod. Olivia slid the envelope across the counter. Filed under emergency protocol, she said. The woman checked the seal, verified the ID, stamped the top page, and said, You'll receive confirmation of review within 24 hours. We stepped back into the sun. Outside, the city was fully awake. People walked past with coffee, phones, dogs on leashes. No one noticed the older woman in a gray suit standing quietly with a folder of legal papers and a calm, settled face. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. At 10:30, I returned home. Sabrina was on the phone in the living room. She glanced up, surprised to see me in heels and full attire. Wow, she said, laughing lightly. Job interview? I smiled. Something like that. Daniel came down the stairs, still tying his tie. Morning, Mom. You're dressed up. There's something important happening, I said. I didn't want to miss it. Sabrina raised an eyebrow. Should we be concerned? No, I replied, placing my tote gently on the side table. But you should be present. Present for what? I poured myself a glass of water, took a slow sip. There will be visitors tomorrow, I said. Who? Sabrina asked, her tone turning cautious. Not realtors, I replied softly. Something far more official. She tilted her head, and for the first time I saw it, the flicker of uncertainty. I placed the folded receipt from the coffee shop next to the broken red mug's remains on the mantel. Time. Proof. The day I disappeared wasn't a vanishing, it was a return. By the next morning, the air had shifted, not in temperature, but in tension, a kind of static that sat just behind the eyes, humming in the spaces between words. I moved through the kitchen quietly, as always. The mug in my hand was plain white now. My red one remained broken, sealed in a bag inside my coat pocket. I cooked eggs, sliced fruit, and set them neatly on my plate. Sabrina scrolled through her phone while sipping something green from a tall glass. Daniel was already dressed for work, tie slightly crooked, eyes tired. We didn't speak much, but the silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. At exactly 11:15, the doorbell rang. Sabrina looked up. Are you expecting someone? I placed my fork down gently. Yes. Daniel stood from the table. Who is it? Why don't you see? He walked to the door and opened it. 3 people stood outside. The first was Olivia, dressed professionally in a dark blazer, binder in hand. Behind her stood a uniformed officer, badge clear, expression neutral, and a woman in a charcoal pantsuit with a slim black briefcase. Can we come in, please? Olivia asked. Daniel turned to me, confusion spreading across his face. "What is this?" I stood slowly. "Something overdue." They entered. Sabrina stiffened at the sight of the officer. "Is this some kind of mistake?" "No," Olivia said calmly. "We're here to review and serve a legal notice regarding unlawful use of power of attorney, unauthorized financial transfers, and fraudulent misrepresentation related to elder care." "I what?" Sabrina said, her voice rising. "That's ridiculous." Olivia opened the binder and laid out the documents on the table, one by one. "This is the POA document submitted with a forged signature. Here's the bank activity showing transfers initiated under false authority. Here's the voicemail recording recovered last week." The woman in the suit stepped forward. "My name is Michelle Lang, investigator with the Elder Financial Protection Unit. These documents have been reviewed and substantiated. You are being served formal notice of civil proceedings." Sabrina laughed, short and brittle. "This is insane. She's making things up. She's confused." I met her eyes. "Do I seem confused now?" Daniel stood in stunned silence, hands at his sides. The officer said nothing but observed with quiet precision. Olivia continued. "We also have statements from multiple service providers and a notarized affidavit confirming that no valid evaluation was requested prior to the guardianship order filing. That filing is now under review for abuse." Daniel finally spoke. "I didn't forge anything. I thought she needed help." "You thought silence meant permission," I said softly. Sabrina crossed her arms. "We were protecting your interests." "You were protecting your debts," I corrected. Olivia handed the final envelope to Sabrina. "This is an official request for immediate cessation of all financial access and a cease and desist order related to any actions involving Mrs. Rowan's estate or name." Sabrina's face twisted. "This is so dramatic. All this over a misunderstanding?" I stepped forward. "Is it still a misunderstanding when you plan to sell my home without my consent? When you filed guardianship paperwork behind my back? When you told people I was slipping, that I was forgetful, that I needed to be moved out quietly?" Sabrina's eyes darted to Daniel. "Say something." Daniel's face was pale. I didn't know she'd go this far. I thought, "You didn't stop her," I said. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, the one who brought me dandelions and cried when he broke the sugar bowl. But that boy was gone, hidden under fear and silence. "I just wanted peace," he whispered. "And I wanted dignity," I replied. The officer stepped forward. "We need to collect all related documents stored on the premises, including printed forms, contracts, and any communication regarding property transfer." "I don't have anything," Sabrina said. Olivia tilted her head. "May we search the vehicle in the garage?" Daniel's eyes widened. "The car?" The officer turned. "We have a warrant for all relevant materials within the property, including vehicles." Within minutes, they returned with a file folder from the glove box. Inside was a signed contract, an agreement to sell the house to a private buyer. The date was Friday, 2 days away. Sale price, $745,000. I sat down slowly at the table. "You were going to sell it while I was still living in it." Sabrina exploded. "Fine. Yes. Because we're drowning, Daniel's business is barely staying afloat, and you just sit here with your mugs and your stories and your dusty old tools like time doesn't exist." I looked at her calmly. "Time does exist, and it just caught up." Daniel sank into the chair across from me. His hands shook. "It was Sabrina's idea," he said. "I just didn't know how to stop it." The room was so still. The only sound was the officer's pen scribbling across a form. "I want her arrested," Sabrina shouted. "She's making this all up." Olivia remained calm. "You're welcome to file a counterclaim, but the burden of proof is heavy, and right now, all the evidence is against you." The officer read Sabrina her rights. Daniel buried his face in his hands. I turned to Olivia. "Will I have to testify?" She looked at me. Only if you want to. I nodded, because I did. Not for revenge, but to remind them I was still here. The next morning, I set the table like I always used to. 3 plates, 3 sets of silverware, a linen napkin folded beside each. The smell of toast and eggs filled the kitchen, the coffee pot already half empty. It felt like a morning from years ago, before everything blurred, before signatures turned against me. At exactly 10 o'clock, they arrived. 2 officers dressed in navy uniforms with calm, practiced faces. Behind them, Olivia stepped forward with her binder. A woman with a camera stood at the edge of the walkway, ready to document the inventory process. A notary public followed behind her, briefcase in hand. I opened the door. "Good morning," I said. "Mrs. Rowan," the lead officer replied with a respectful nod. "We're here to carry out the warrant and deliver notice of legal action. May we come in?" "Of course." Sabrina was in the living room, legs crossed, tapping away at her phone. She looked up at the sound of boots on hardwood. "What now?" she asked, voice edged with impatience. Olivia laid the binder on the table. "Today's visit is procedural. We'll be walking through the documents you've previously handled, identifying any inconsistencies, and confirming that all related items are accounted for." "I already told you everything," Sabrina snapped. The notary opened her case and removed 2 identical forms. "This is an official recording of sworn statements," she said. "Anything you say today may be entered into evidence." Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs, shirt half-buttoned, face pale. "What's happening?" Olivia looked at him. "We're here to read the file." I sat down slowly in the chair closest to the fireplace. My binder lay on the table, closed but solid. I reached over and opened it. The room went quiet as Olivia began. "On August 8th, she said, a power of attorney was submitted to the bank on behalf of Isabella Rowan, indicating Sabrina Rowan as her financial agent. The document was signed without proper witness, and the notary seal has been verified as fraudulent." She turned the page. "On August 11th, 2 transfers totaling $14,350 were made from Mrs. Rowan's personal savings to an account under Daniel Rowan's name." Sabrina scoffed. "She gave him that money. She forgets things all the time." Olivia didn't flinch. "We have no record of consent, and a recording from August 12th confirms plans to finalize guardianship paperwork without Mrs. Rowan's knowledge." She pressed play on the small speaker. The voices echoed faintly. Daniel's, nervous. Sabrina's, cold and calculating. "Just keep her calm till Friday. She'll be in Cypress Pines by the weekend." The sound stopped. Sabrina's mouth opened, then shut. Daniel sat down slowly. The officer stepped forward. "We have reason to believe that intent to defraud was present." Sabrina laughed, but it came out sharp, shaky. "Intent? This is her house. She's old." She was confused. I lifted my head. "I'm not confused now." She turned to me. "You've always been dramatic." The notary raised her voice. "Please direct all remarks through counsel or remain silent." The camera clicked once, then again. Olivia continued. "We also found evidence of a drafted sale agreement for this property, unsigned but dated and prepared, with Daniel Rowan listed as seller and Sabrina Rowan as co-agent." She slid the papers across the table. Daniel winced. "It wasn't signed." "But it was prepared," Olivia replied, "without the legal right to do so." The officer reached into his coat and retrieved a small folder. And this morning, a statement from the Department of Real Estate confirmed that the Rowan property was scheduled for pre-inspection later this week. Sabrina stood up. "You can't do this. This is harassment." The second officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, please remain seated." Sabrina ignored him and turned to Daniel. "Say something. This is your mother. She's playing the victim." Daniel's face was blank, pale, as if something inside him had finally broken free. "She's my mother," he whispered, and we tried to erase her. Sabrina's jaw dropped. "You weak—" The first officer gently but firmly took her arm. "Ma'am, you are being placed under investigation for elder abuse, fraudulent activity, and attempted property theft. You may choose to remain silent." He did not cuff her. Not yet. But the weight of the paper was heavier than any chain. The notary documented every line, each admission, each reply. The camera recorded the entire process. Sabrina's resistance began to crumble not with shouting, but with silence. When no one defended her, when the pages spoke louder than her voice. Daniel looked at me once more. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said, "but you let someone else do it for you." The officers collected the rest of the documents, labeled the sale agreement as evidence, and prepared to leave. Sabrina sat on the couch, shaking. Not from fear, but from realization that this had gone further than she ever thought it would. That quiet did not mean powerless. Before they left, Olivia handed me one final paper. "Tomorrow we'll begin the official motion to transfer guardianship back to you and file suit for damages." I nodded, folded the paper, and slipped it into my tote. As the front door closed behind them, I looked around the room. The table, the mantel, the corner where the red mug used to sit. It was still my home. And now, so was the truth. The house was still after they left, the kind of stillness that doesn't soothe but echoes. I sat in the kitchen, a cup of untouched tea cooling in my hands, as Daniel paced the hallway like a man trying to walk back time. Sabrina had locked herself in the bedroom, though the occasional burst of her voice carried through the walls. Accusations, blame, sharp syllables aimed at no one and everyone. Daniel walked into the kitchen, paused, and looked at me. His tie was crooked. His hands trembled slightly. "I didn't know," he said. I didn't answer. I thought it was just temporary, that maybe you were tired, that maybe Sabrina was right. I placed the teacup down gently, letting the silence settle between us like dust. "I didn't think it would go this far," he whispered. "But it did." He sank into the chair across from me. "It started small. We just wanted to help. At least I did. Then the bills came and the business became more important than your mother," I said. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. In the hallway, the bedroom door slammed open. Sabrina stormed in, red-faced, eyes burning. "This is your fault," she spat at Daniel. "You let her do this. You sat there like a coward while she ripped everything apart." Daniel stood, his voice brittle. "You forged her name. You filed those papers without even telling me. I told you everything," she shouted. "You just pretended not to hear. You lied to her. I protected us." They stared at each other. Two people once united in silence, now split by a volume neither of them could control. "She never respected you," Sabrina hissed. "All those years, you followed her around like a little boy trying to earn praise she never gave." Daniel's face went pale. "That's not true, isn't it?" she said. "Why do you think it was so easy to take over? Because she was never going to let go of this place, of you." I watched them from my chair, watched the structure they built on shadows begin to collapse under the weight of light. Sabrina turned to me. "You think this makes you some kind of hero? You think people will thank you for turning your own family in?" I didn't move. "I think people should know the truth, especially the people who pretend to love you while planning your disappearance." Daniel's hands clenched. She was going to sell the house. "I know," I said. "I didn't sign anything," he added quickly, as if hoping that meant something. "But you didn't stop her." He sat back down, burying his face in his hands. "I just wanted peace. Peace built on deceit doesn't last." The room went quiet again, not like before. This silence was final, like the air had closed around something that couldn't be reopened. An hour later, Olivia returned with an officer and a small team. They collected. More documents confirmed the sale agreement had been withdrawn from the listing site and documented Sabrina's verbal hostility as part of the civil claim. Sabrina was asked to leave the premises until the hearing. Daniel didn't speak as she packed a bag and slammed the door behind her. The officer offered me a nod before following them out. Olivia stayed behind, flipping through the binder with a precision that felt both clinical and caring. "Next steps?" I asked. "We'll file the full claim this week," she said. "The financial damages, the breach of fiduciary trust, and the fraudulent filing. It'll move quickly. The evidence is strong." "And Daniel?" She closed the folder gently. "He wasn't the one who signed. He enabled. That's harder to prosecute. But the family court might issue a protective clause." I nodded. After she left, Daniel remained seated at the kitchen table, shoulders slumped forward. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said quietly. "You'll have to figure that out," I replied. "I don't deserve to stay." "No," I said, "but you can stay until the hearing. After that, we'll see." He nodded. "Thank you." I stood and walked to the living room, where a beam of sunlight cut across the rug. It illuminated the edge of a framed photograph. Marcus, smiling, arms folded, standing outside the shop we built together. I picked it up and placed it on the mantel. Daniel joined me after a while, standing a few feet away. Not close, but not out of reach. "I found something," he said, "in the car, after they searched it." He held out a small envelope. Inside was a contract, unsigned but complete. A deposit check stapled to the front. The sale price written clearly in blue ink, $745,000. "She never told me she finalized this," he said. "I didn't know." I took the envelope and placed it on the table with the others. "You do now," I said. "That's what matters." We stood there a while longer, the house no longer humming with secrets, but with something else, truth, weighty, earned. 2 days passed before the headlines found me. At first, it was a whisper, a neighbor stopping me on the porch, asking gently, "Are you okay?" The kind of question that means more than it asks. I nodded, smiled politely, and went back inside. Then the phone started ringing. Blocked numbers, unknown area codes. I didn't answer any of them. That afternoon, Olivia stopped by with a printed copy of the article. It had no byline, but the voice was unmistakable. The title read, "She pretended to be of sound mind until she tore her family apart." The piece painted me as manipulative, accused me of fabricating mental clarity to avoid necessary care. It questioned the legitimacy of the legal filings, hinted at a bitter woman using paperwork as revenge. She staged everything, the article claimed. She weaponized her age and turned it into ammunition. I read it twice, then folded it slowly, placed it in a drawer, and sat with my hands resting on my lap. Outside, a delivery truck passed, its brakes screeching faintly as it pulled away. The house was still again, until the mail came. Among the utility bills and appointment cards, I found an unmarked envelope. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten in block letters. "You ruined your family over bricks and walls." No signature. No kindness. Just the kind of message that bleeds even when it's not true. I placed it next to the article in the drawer. Later, I made myself tea, sat in the chair by the window, the one Marcus used to favor in the afternoons. The sky outside was a dim gray, the kind of overcast that made everything look soft and distant. Daniel came downstairs but didn't speak. He moved around the kitchen in slow motion, like someone who had just stepped off a spinning ride. He didn't ask about the article. He didn't have to. I could feel the shame radiating from him like heat. When he left for the store, I returned to the drawer and pulled out an old wooden box. Inside were letters, real ones, written by hand, folded with care, addressed in Marcus's even script. I had saved every letter he wrote me since college, but there was one I hadn't touched since the day I first read it, sealed in a small white envelope, the ink slightly faded. On the front it read, Open if the world tries to erase you. I broke the seal. Inside, his words waited. My love, if you're reading this, something has happened. Something that makes you feel small, invisible, unworthy of the space you occupy. Maybe it came from a stranger, maybe from someone who should have known better. But listen to me. You are not fragile. You are not lost. You are not what they say. Protect your dignity, even from those you love most, because no one else will. I read it again and again. And on the third time, the tears came. Quiet, undramatic. Not for the article, not for the hate letter, but for the weight of being unseen by those you raised, for the ache of needing a dead man's voice to remind you that you matter. When the tears stopped, I folded the letter and placed it in the inner pocket of my coat. That evening, Olivia stopped by again. She noticed the article on the table. "I've already drafted a response," she said. "It won't undo the damage, but it'll reach the right people." I shook my head. "No, let it sit." She looked at me. "People will believe what they want," I said. "I'm not going to fight shadows with a louder voice." She nodded. "Then we'll respond with actions." We sat together for a while. She shared updates on the court date, the statement from the Department of Aging, and the confirmation that Sabrina had officially been barred from initiating any further financial activity under my name. But I barely heard her. My mind kept returning to the line in Marcus's letter. Protect your dignity even from those you love most, even from Daniel, even from the ones you held in the dark, the ones you fed before feeding yourself. I had done that, and now I would protect what remained, quietly, completely. The hearing was scheduled for a Friday, a quiet one. No press, no jury, just 3 people behind a wooden bench and several others waiting with files, clipboards, and glances that meant business. I wore the same gray suit. Olivia sat beside me. Daniel sat behind. Sabrina didn't show. Her lawyer appeared instead, offering a prepared statement filled with language like misunderstanding, lack of intent, and family disagreement. The judge read through the paperwork with the steady calm of someone who'd seen it all before. Sons selling homes behind mothers' backs, wives disguising fraud as foresight. He asked only one question. "Mrs. Rowan, what outcome are you seeking today?" I stood. My voice didn't shake. Restoration, of ownership, of dignity, of silence. There was a pause in the room, like the air itself had taken a breath. The judge nodded. "All temporary transfers are void," he said. "All access suspended. The matter of civil liability will proceed to mediation, and criminal concerns have been referred to the appropriate office." I sat down slowly. It was done. Not with shouting, not with vengeance, with paper, with truth, and with stillness. Outside the courthouse, Daniel approached me. He held something in his hands, a small wooden box I hadn't seen in years. One Marcus had made, smooth cedar with a sliding lid. "I found this in the garage," he said. "I thought maybe you forgot it." I took it from him gently. "I never forgot anything, Daniel. I just stopped reminding you." He looked away. "I don't know what happens now." "You learn," I said, "and then you change. Or you don't." He nodded, swallowed hard, then walked away. I didn't stop him. Back home, I brewed a fresh pot of tea and placed the mug carefully on the windowsill. I looked outside, the light bending through the branches, casting fractured patterns on the floor. The house felt different, not because anything had changed, but because nothing was hidden anymore. Later that day, Olivia returned with final documents for my signature: settlement proceedings, protection orders, a notarized agreement that barred Sabrina from contacting or entering the property for 5 years. I also included a clause about inheritance, she said. Optional, of course. I read through it. It stated clearly, all claims to future estate, assets, and property would be voided unless a new will was signed, witnessed, and filed. I want her name removed, I said. Olivia nodded. Understood. We sat for a while. No hurry. She told me about a case she was working on. Another elderly woman, similar story, different state. I told her she was becoming exactly the kind of person the world needed more of. Before she left, she asked, "Do you feel relief?" "No," I replied. "I feel return." That evening, I gathered my notebooks, bank documents, and recordings. Everything that had lived in the folder marked evidence, and I began to shred them, one by one, not out of denial, but because they had served their purpose. Justice, I had learned, does not always need a witness. Sometimes it only needs to be written, filed, and walked away from. The next morning, I made a final stop at the bank. Janine smiled when she saw me. "Everything in order now?" "Yes," I said. "One more thing." I handed her a certified form, the establishment of a small foundation. Name: the Silent Cedar Fund Mission, to support elderly individuals experiencing financial or housing abuse by immediate family members. Janine's eyes misted. "That's incredible." "No," I said. "It's necessary." The fund was modest, 50% of the settlement money from the civil case. Enough to start something. Enough to reach someone who felt like I did 3 months ago, standing at the edge of her own living room, wondering if she'd already disappeared. When I returned home, the front porch creaked slightly beneath my shoes. I paused there, hand resting on the rail Marcus built with bolts too big and love too obvious. The wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, the air smelled like lemon wood polish and tea leaves. Everything was where I left it, and no one could take it now. Daniel had written a letter. I found it on the kitchen table that afternoon. He didn't knock, didn't ring the bell. He simply left it. It read, "I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I am. I lost sight. I let fear guide me. You didn't deserve any of it. I hope someday I'm a man you'd still be proud of." I folded it once and placed it in the box with Marcus's tools, not as forgiveness, but as record. People say silence is weakness, that it means surrender, but they're wrong. Silence is a decision, a space where noise ends and clarity begins. And this house, this life, was mine again. Not because I screamed, but because I didn't. I left the house 2 weeks later, not out of fear, not because I had to, but because I wanted to start somewhere new, somewhere mine. The house was no longer under threat. My name was on every line it needed to be. But I had come to understand something. Survival is not the same as peace. And peace, for me, required space, air, wood beneath my hands again. I moved to a small town up north where the trees grew taller and the streets didn't hum with ghosts. It wasn't a place I had history with, and that was the point. I rented a little house with wide windows and peeling shutters, nestled at the edge of a wooded trail. In the back stood an old workshop. The roof sagged, dust coated the benches, rust crawled along the edges of forgotten tools, but it smelled like cedar, like potential, like something waiting to be held again. I spent the first week cleaning. I moved slow, letting the dust settle around me before sweeping it away. I replaced bulbs, repaired drawers, oiled hinges. By the end of the second week, I had cleared a space large enough for a workbench and set up a row of chisels, mallets, clamps, and then I began to carve. At first, it was nothing fancy. Boxes, spoons, picture frames. I didn't make them to sell. I made them to remember who I was before Daniel's voice broke through the phone speaker that night, before I became a project in someone else's life. Word spread slowly, the way it does in small towns. A woman at the local diner asked if I'd teach her grandson how to make a birdhouse. A boy on a bicycle dropped by to ask if he could help sand stuff. Before long, I had a sign on the door, Saturday Woodshop, for the curious and quiet. It wasn't a business. It was a kind of chapel. The kids came with their questions and crooked smiles, and I answered with patience. We made things that didn't need to be perfect, only honest. One afternoon, Olivia came to visit. She had traded her blazer for a denim jacket and brought a box of pastries that made the whole shop smell like cinnamon and butter. "You look good," she said. "I feel like something again." We sat on the porch sipping tea, the breeze tugging at the pages of a woodworking magazine resting on the table. "I read about the fund you started," she said. "Silent Cedar." "It's not much," I replied, "but it's something. A place for people like me." She smiled. "You know, you're not like most of my clients." "I'm not sure that's a compliment." "It is," she laughed. "Most people want to fight with fire. You chose quiet. Fire burns out. Wood lasts." She nodded. "You ever think about writing it all down, the story?" "I'm still living it," I said. Later that evening, after she'd left, I opened the back drawer of my workbench and pulled out the red mug. Still broken, still wrapped in its paper towel. I thought about gluing it back together. Then I placed it gently on a shelf above the window, pieces resting side by side, like a puzzle not quite solved. The workshop glowed in the last light of day. Dust floated in golden slants. The air smelled like lemon oil and shavings. I ran my hand over a carving the kids, and I had made the weekend before. A sign that read, "Silence isn't weakness. It's the space where truth gathers strength." That phrase had come to me one morning while sanding a drawer. I had written it down without thinking. Now it was burned into the grain. That weekend, we held a small exhibition in the town square. Nothing big, just a few folding tables, some lemonade, and the kinds of projects only patience could make. A jewelry box with uneven hinges, a chair that wobbled slightly, a lamp carved into the shape of a tree trunk. People came. They asked questions. They listened. I told the story not of betrayal, but of beginning again. A few nodded with knowing eyes. One woman touched my arm gently and whispered, "I needed to hear this." It was never about revenge. It was always about return, not to what was, but to who I had always been. Later that night, I stood alone in the workshop. A candle flickered on the bench. The window was open, and outside the trees swayed gently, speaking in a language older than hurt. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. Cedar, dust, hope. Not loud, but alive. The house is quiet again, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore. My name is Isabella Rowan. I'm 68 now, and every morning I pour my coffee into the red mug I once packed in a box meant for somewhere I'd never go. I sit by the window that faces east, where the sun rises soft and shy, and I listen. Not to voices, not to arguments, not to accusations, just to the sound of being here, still here. It's been a year since I left that house, since I walked out before anyone could pack my things for me. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't cry in front of them. I didn't slam the door. I simply closed it. And when I turned the key in my own front door, this small place by the water that smells faintly of jasmine and salt, I knew it wasn't an escape. It was a return. For the first few months, there were no calls. Not from Daniel, not from Sabrina. The silence was their answer, and in that silence, I rebuilt myself. I started gardening, just rosemary and thyme at first, but then lavender and tomatoes. A neighbor gave me a pot of lilies for my birthday. I didn't tell her I cried when they bloomed. I got used to my own company again, not the way you do when you're lonely, the way you do when you're whole. The file I kept, the one that proved what they planned for me, remains untouched in the drawer by my bedside. I never needed to use it. Not in court, not in confrontation. Just knowing it was real was enough. I met Rosa at the community book club. She's 72 and argues passionately about mysteries. She bakes blueberry scones and never asks why I wince at the word facility. She just passes me tea and says, "You're not a burden, you're a beginning." Sometimes I write letters to myself, just small things, reminders, like, "You deserve rooms where no one waits for you to disappear," or Your voice is not background noise." And then, one morning, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer. "Hi, Mom." His voice was slower, a little hoarse. He cleared his throat, then paused like the air between us was too thick to breathe. "It's me, Daniel." I didn't respond right away, not out of anger. I was just listening to the voice of a son I hadn't heard in 364 days. "I found the file," he said. "I didn't know you kept it." I waited. She gave it to me, Sabrina, after she left, after she told me everything about the forms, about Uncle Ray, about how she convinced me it was for your good. There was wind in the background, and then a shaky inhale. I was wrong. I was weak. And I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know. I've been sober for 6 months. I'm in therapy. I left the firm. He laughed, once, short and bitter. "I'm working at a community center now, teaching kids coding. Can you believe that?" I said nothing. Then he said something I wasn't ready for, and yet I'd waited a lifetime to hear. "You didn't deserve any of it. You were never the burden. I was." The line was quiet for a long moment. "I sent you something," he added. "You don't have to open it. It's just, if you ever want to talk or write or send it back unopened, that's okay too." After he hung up, I stood by the window for a long while. Then I opened the mailbox. Inside was a small envelope. No return address, just my name in his handwriting. Inside was a photograph, one I'd forgotten existed. It was of Daniel, maybe 10 years old, sitting on my lap, both of us laughing. Behind us, a cake, one candle, the red mug in my hand. Taped to the back of the photo was a note. "I remember this day. You taught me how to tie my shoes. You said, 'The world will try to trip you up, but double knots help.' I should have listened more." I sat on the porch that evening with that photo in my hand, the scent of rosemary rising behind me, the light from the kitchen warm against my back. I didn't call him, not yet. But I placed the photo on my shelf, next to the mug, next to the lilies. Some wounds don't heal with noise. Some bridges don't rebuild with apologies. They rebuild with time, with stillness, with two people standing on opposite shores, holding out their hands. The next morning, I wrote a card. Nothing dramatic, just a small white card with my handwriting on it. "I'm here. I've always been." I didn't sign it with love. I didn't sign it with guilt. I just signed it, Mom. And that was enough.